for being here. I am Mara Clara Rubio. I'm a local consultant for the GDI Hub. And as you're very well aware, most of you who are here and who has been working in this research project has been leading a similar project in 6 cities around the world regarding inclusive infrastructure. Of course, in Medellín, the ally, the local partner has been Elcomite. I'm sure that you have visited them, you have worked with them in different spaces and different spheres of action. Thank you very much for being here. I'm here from the London team, from the GDI Hub. Michaela Patrick, I will give her the floor shortly. And thank you so very much for being here, so we get a context and we get some information regarding the methodology of this project, of this case study, and we will be sharing the results regarding inclusive infrastructures in built environments and ecosystems. Michaela, you have the floor. Thank you. There we go. Yes, closer to your mouth. That will make it easier. Well, thank you very much for being here with us today. And we hope that this participation today clearly reflects your interest to make Medellín a really accessible and inclusive cities in the world. Today, we have a hybrid event that is, we have people here on site and virtually, so we would like to welcome you. For those of you that are listening to us from every single corner of the world, I would like to share with you some housekeeping notes. Today we will be in Spanish. For our international audience, we do have simultaneous interpreting or translation, both English and Spanish. And you can click in the globe-like icon at the bottom left, right, as you look at the screen at the right corner, if you're using a mobile device. We have shared the presentation in English with all the participants so they can follow that. The interpreter will not repeat a back translation from Spanish into English, as she's doing it in both languages. Thank you. Today we have signed interpreters, Colombian signed interpreters here on site, and we have subtitles in English for the online audience. You can actually do your questions by using Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. So let us go to today's agenda. We are very, very happy to officially launch our case study report. The inclusive design and accessibility in built environment in Medellín, Colombia. After this event, we will have the report will be free to download online in a PDF format, both the full report and the executive summary or synopsis. Along with UI, we will have an accessible report of the report, and that will be that will be available for download in the coming weeks. The idea is that this report becomes a tool that really helps the city of Medellín to be more accessible and inclusive city. We are doing a very good job, but of course, just like in every city of the world, we can do more. We can do much more. And this report actually highlights recommendations, and lastly, it describes the opportunities we have for progress. We are very happy to have here today the Commonwealth Office and UK Aid, represented by the British Embassy before Colombia, and Corporación Social, Elcomite. And we have both private, public sector, and of course, disability representatives here in Medellin. We will be listening to their comments later on during the presentation. First of all, we would like to thank all the partners and allies, everyone that has helped the project. Without you, this report would not be real, would not be tangible. Thank you for your generosity, for the time you have put into conducting this. I really and sincerely hope that this report gives a voice to your aspirations, to your claim to make Medellin a more inclusive of that. And thank you for the space that we're using today, which is Ruta N. We have lots of friends, colleagues, and some people with disability that have been very active, along with other collaborators that work within the disability and which with AI, not only in Medellin, but also in the international arena. I will take about 5 minutes of your time to introduce GDI Hub to you and tell you the AT2030, which is actually financed and funded by the UK aid agency. And then we will give the floor to our main speakers, and then we will talk and learn more about the project. Thank you. Perfect. GDI Hub is driving disability innovation in order to create a fairer world. We offer teaching, research, ideas analysis, creating new knowledge and products from our UCL-based academic research in the University of the City of London, UCL, and our community interest company. We are bringing new perspectives and use bold approaches to accelerate change. Co-participation, co-creation, and collaboration is the power engine in everything we do. We work in 40+ countries, and we have reached over 29 million people around the world. It's a bit slow, but let's see if we can make it. It will work. If it happens to Bill Gates, it can happen to anybody. There we go. Right, perfect. Very well. GDI Hub, again, actually it's a legacy from the 2012 Paralympic Games. London 2012 had more para athletes from more countries represented than ever before. The stadiums were full. We made history, sparking a new momentum across the disability justice movement. And then in 2016, the team behind the 2012 legacy team joined top academic institutions, and they launched GDI Hub. Bear with me, please. It will work. No, actually, let's go back. Go back. We have minor technical issues, but I know you are more than understanding. Anyway, while the PowerPoint comes on the screen, we are also thought leaders in inclusive design. What we want to do is to replicate the inclusive infrastructure expertise from London 2012 into impact on the ground. Perfect. So with focus on climate and crisis, we are taking that different knowledge to stakeholders and decision makers around the world. We call upon actions, and we support the creation of disability inclusive and climate resilient cities. We have launched our GDI Hub's inclusive design strategy at the World Urban Forum in Katowice, Poland in June 2022. And AT2030, very briefly, it is the main program that we have right now at GDI Hub. And we are seeing testing what, quote unquote, what works to improve life-changing AT for all, assistive technology for AT. That's, in a nutshell, AT2030. We are working with many strategic partners, over 70, and we also work in different spheres of also creating new models, new ideas. And we work in over 35 countries. That's where we have presence. We could move forward if you want. Move forward. Next. Muy bien. So a part of AT2030 is AT and inclusive technologies. We need to have an accessible and inclusive ecosystem for ATs to work. So we are working in 6 cities in the world. We have launched case studies in India, Mongolia, Kenya, Indonesia, Sierra Leone, and today we launched Medellín, Colombia, where we are, this wonderful case studies. And let's go to the next slide. And what we're going to do is combine the results from this 6 city case studies. We will have one comparison report, and then that will yield a global action report so that the stakeholders and all the parties involved actually will benefit from each other, how we can work together in order to create a more inclusive world. So we really hope that this will produce a radical change in all countries. It is of utmost importance that we build, we design, that we operate, and we work in such a way that we guarantee that this will work and the cities will be friendly for everyone. And that, of course, include every single human being, including those presented with disabilities, so that actually in the long term, on short term and midterm, we will be able to meet with the global agenda and making sure that no one is left behind. Great. Brilliant, Maragara. Now you have the floor. Here we go. Thank you, Micaela. She is making twice as much effort, her third language, not the second language. So thank you for that. Thank you for respecting and for trying to do it. And thank you for giving us a nutshell. We have 2 special keynote speakers, 2 special guests here. First, Marcela Ochoa. She is the representative of the British Embassy in Colombia here. And of course, she wants to share with us some welcoming remarks. Marcela, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours, ma'am. Very good morning to you all. I am Marcelo Ochoa. Like it was said, I am the representative here in Medellin for the British Embassy before the Colombian government. That is pretty much a new position. It has started last year in November because of the importance that we see of all projects ongoing in Medellin. So I'm very happy to be here with you. I also represent today the Development and Commonwealth Office, or FCDO, which is the equivalent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the UK, we are providing UK'd funds for inclusive infrastructure project, which is part of the broad program, which is AT2023. The FCO, they launched a special program in February last year in Norway in the Disability World Forum. AT technology for us has been described as an enabler, which means that it enables, and it's crucial so people are able to meet their freedom and their basic human rights and access healthcare, education, employment, or labor market to fully participate in their communities and to provide a level field for those that have been affected either by prolonged or short humanitarian crisis. We know that we have to do more in order to protect those most vulnerable in the face of climate change, and we need to guarantee that girls and women have the same access as boys and men. We will still be conducting research to make sure that AT is affordable and accessible for all. Our program AT2030 is just starting. It is really a global program that clearly proves what really works in order to improve access to assistive technology like wheelchairs, earpieces, orthotics, glasses, prostheses, and digital devices. AT2030 centers in innovative products and technology, and that's what we have here in Medellin. And that's why one of the reasons why we're here. What we saw this morning, reading the news, and last night, we were so happy to see that Medellin is really an innovation here. And that's why we're in Ruta N, in this wonderful venue. These technologies will allow us to increase reach and scale in order to develop supply chain and local capacity that will actually make sure that we can access these products, because they will be much more, from economical standpoint of view, affordable and accessible. We want to make sure that we guarantee government funding lines in order to fund projects like the one that convinces here today, and working with the local communities and understanding how AT is important. We do proof of concept with the schools and with social programs in order to diminish that stigma. We try technologies in local context, and we consider and we take into account the ecosystem and what has been built, like roads, communications, etc., have been friendly or are friendly, or they were built with people who are presented with disabilities or need some sort of ATs. So GDI Hub, this is a call to action to keep on doing what you're doing, because you're doing it very well. Today, you will be introducing a report here, and that will give us ideas of the road to be followed. I know it is hard. Sometimes it's a struggle, but we can work together to have affordable technology and to change the way policies are made to make them more affordable at a national and international level. We will then be able to see how we can involve the private sector, improve supply and demand, and all within the framework of that infrastructure that, unfortunately, to date, has not been adapted. So if we want to improve access, if we want to open access, and we want to allow those elder citizens or those presented with disability want to take this and move forward, we need to take into account the built infrastructure, the ecosystem that we live. And that's why we are here in a hybrid event, both on site and online. Again, thank you so very much to those that made possible this case study, from the candidacy of Medellín to what we are going to have presented. To all of you that worked so hard, thank you so very much. We will be listening to the results and Sonia from Elcomite, who will give us more information about why we are here, precisely here in Ruta N. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you, Marcela, and to the team, the full team with the British Embassy, those in the UK, all the team, the fact that we keep on researching on the existing infrastructure and the future of infrastructure. And now I'll give the floor to Sonia Gallardo. She's the director of Elcomite. She is the key piece of this puzzle from the start. Sonia, you have the floor. Warm greetings to everyone here on site and online. Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, Michaela. It was very hard to write this speech and see what I was going to share with you and to tell you about. What is really, really hard is that how do I say hello? Because usually there's some protocol and you need to start in a very protocol loaded. But from Elcomite, we said, we're not going to observe protocol. We just want to embrace you all. We want to hug you all, because we couldn't say, what is the order of precedence as per protocol and who are we going to greet first? So thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having participated in this. And thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge, your know-how regarding what you experiment on a daily basis and what you live on a daily basis here in the city of Medellín. I'm going to share a story with you, if I may. I am not Paisa. I might look like Paisa region in Colombia. I am from Barranquilla. Oh my goodness gracious, where is she coming from? Was this little girl, 16 years old. I'm not going to tell you how many years I've been here, because then you will know my age. But I love Barranquilla. I love the city, but Barranquilla needs to follow the way of Medellín. Medellín is the avant-garde. And at one point I said, I need to go to Medellín because I felt in my bones that Medellín had a trait, a quality vis-a-vis other countries. Medellín is human-centric. We can call it any way we want it. We can call it an inclusive city. We can call it the eternal spring and the Garden of Colombia city. You can call it any way you want, but Medellín always places people in the core, the backbone. That is part of its DNA, part of its culture, and that's what makes the paisas, the locals, embrace foreigners. That's what tourists are drawn here, and that's what makes people to want to come and live in Medellín. And the fact that Medellín was chosen to participate in this global study makes it even more special, because when I say that Medellín is human-centric, I always need to tell you that it has a special additional characteristics. The city of Medellín does not care if you question the city, if you measure the city, because they know that by being measured, by being audited, you can learn and you can improve. And that is the key of this study. And this is what we asked for. And we told all of you, tell us the reality. Do not put any makeup on it. Do not be politically correct so it looks beautiful. Oh, you're going to have British people from the UK and London and come and give them that. No, give them the reality. Give them the raw data. Give them what you are. Because it is true, Medellín, unfortunately, has grown rapidly and it is not adapted to everyone. And Medellín, in the corredor del Rio, which is along the river, and we are now having the underground, but we see that we have grown exponentially, very rapidly, and unfortunately, they've been very well in making it grow, but they have made it grow within many barriers. And this study clearly shows that we have done very well, but we still need to improve. Maybe if we compare vis-a-vis Medellín to other countries, to other cities in the country, in Colombia, we're doing well. But that is what we're doing. And what is important here is that the results of these studies will make us to rethink how we're going to do things differently moving forward. Because Medellín maybe needs another name, a territory that is inclusive, a society that is inclusive. You can put any tag you want, but Medellín has to be a city for all, where all of us find a way to participate, to move around, where we all find a way to have our daily activities, not perfect, not ideal, because ideal or perfect cities do not exist, but understanding that based in that change from society of paradigm on how each of the citizens sees the person that is next to ourselves, there we're changing. And if we can even move forward and the infrastructure of the city, the infrastructure of the transport network adapts to the needs of each of the citizens here, then we are really moving forward and we are having a territory, we're having an ecosystem, we're having a habitat that is inclusive for all. But that's why when they told us, Elcomite, do you want to be there? And we said yes, because Medellín as a city can accept criticism, because Medellín can accept the reality and say, we've done this wrong, let us move forward by changing it. And that's what I wanted to leave as a take-home message and as a call to action. From this report forward, we need to recognize where we have to work at. And we were able to do it in an articulated and cross-linked fashion, because we participating in the meetings, we provided information. This was a multi-party effort. From now on, my call to action is that we show that this report, with our failures, with our successes, enables us to move forward by participating as a whole, where all the stakeholders embrace their goals, embrace what they have to do, and take responsibility for their actions. These results have to be objectives, have to be goals and targets for the city, have to be goals and targets for the society. Medellín, we can do that and much more. And let us hope we can do that in Barranquilla, in my hometown. I am a happy adopted Paisa in my heart. I was born in the coast, but and yes, sometimes my heart is broken, but Medellín is an example to be followed. Medellín has been an example to the country, and I'm sure that this will not be the exception. And I will finish with the message that we always have at the Elcomite. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for choosing us as one of the participant countries and cities. Thank you to every single person that participated in the surveys, interviews, activities. Thank you to the team, Maria Isabel, Janet, who led Elcomite team. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for being here, for listening, for learning, and for helping us to recognize the failures we had. Today is the start. Now we have a baseline, and let us hope we will have a different reality moving forward, making sure that the projects that now will be triggered as a result of this report, we will be the engine for change, the transformation. Transformation starts in each of us. This is not just infrastructure. That comes later. Inclusion is not just infrastructure. It goes hand in hand with a mental change, with a paradigm change, and not only with those that day-to-day see barriers because they are presented with a disability. This entails the activities and participation of both private and public sector. Cities have to be lived, and that has to be the main concept. How do you live an inclusive city? From today, moving forward, that's what we need to do. Thank you. And again, I will say thank you again and again. Let us work as a team and build the city that we want. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for those words, which are very apropos. Because today we have with us here today a whole series of leaders from many public, private institutions. All those calls to action, Sonia, are not only for us as citizens, but they're also are on the government and the different agencies. We have planning, infrastructure, ASMET, we have Metro Plus, we have Plus entrepreneurs, we have private companies that design, that change the way in which we present information, we, BUA, how we move around. Amatus here, so being here as citizens who live in this city of Medellín. We also have the T-shirts of our different institutions, and those calls to actions indeed have to come through our roles or have to call upon our roles. Thank you for the call of action. And now, once again, I'm going to give the floor to Micaela, now in company with Isabella, the committee, the comité, and me. Once again, we're going to start to tell you what we found, how we did it, what challenges we have, and also what solutions we propose. So go right ahead. You have the floor so you can tell this wonderful audience what it was that we found. Okay, it's better off like this. Okay. Today, we're going to present to you the results of the case study. And to begin with, I'm going to go directly to Maria Isabel from the committee to introduce you to the methods, how we worked on this project. And so, Maria Isabel, please go right ahead. A very good day to all. I don't want to begin without introducing myself. From Insignia means it's my insignia is this, and we're going to look at how this process went, the Cosme Medellin study. And to begin, we have a context that we're going to put this into. Medellin has around 78,562 disabled people, almost 80,000 disabled people in the city, and that's 15% of the world population of worldwide that we have currently. In this research project, we tracked the literature, but also regulations regarding infrastructure, disability, and we found, as we can see on the slide, I'm going to describe the slides for the visual disability population. We find a timeline of regulation, laws, important events, nationally, domestic, and in the city of Medellin. I'm not going to take up too much time to delve into this, but I will make reference to some of them, such as our political constitution in 1991, where also importance is given to the population that's disabled in this country, important events such as the building of the subway, the metro, tramway, cable metro, and tramway, Metro Plus, but it's also very important for the city. The creation of the committees, the communal committees, and different disabled inclusion, today called inclusive or in committees, that are highly tied to the issue of updating public policies for disability in 2019. And as an important factor, bearing much more in mind the goal of our research project is that in 2021, there was the creation of the Accessibility Committee. We're going to offer you a summary of how that research project went. We focused a lot on the community, mainly the entire process with the disabled population. And also we looked at the practices in the city, what they were regarding everything having to do with accessibility, infrastructure, inclusive infrastructure. And like I was saying, in connection with the previous slide where we had the timeline, we also dealt with policy issues, both domestically and obviously very specifically in the city of Medellín. And in this process, we were able to work on the interviews with 20 disabled persons who live in Medellín and other players, both the public and private sector. And within the research process, we had a lot of important questions that gave some orientation to the project. As we can see on the slide, I'm going to read them to also help the visually disabled people to understand what policies, regulation, guidelines, or good practices exist. What are the cities doing in that regard currently? What is it like to live with a disability in Medellín? And what does good inclusive infrastructure look like? How can that inclusive infrastructure support the use of assistive technologies? And what is understood as inclusive design? So I'm going to describe what's on the slide in a little bit. In addition to the text, we have a picture of one of the workshops where we used a tool that was a map of the city of Medellín with the different counties, so to say, communities, and we could see people from the team helping place stickers with places that have accessibility and others that don't, and with the participants of the workshops. And we used several methods. One was interviews. We also had photo journals with this 5 people disabled. Some had participated in the interviews, other people that also we thought were very important for them to help us record in their journal through pictures, co-design activities, several tools, strategies, journey mapping, participatory mapping, priority setting. And lastly, we did different workshops. In this case, 3 workshops that were multi-stakeholder. We should highlight that these methods have been used in the other 5 case studies, except that in Medellín, given since our city dynamics, we proposed the performance of a 3rd workshop that the other cities had only 2. But we proposed a 3rd workshop, to do with caregivers for the disabled, and we named it, let's say, as a representative, as a benchmark, as a symbol. Community, the caregivers live the disability without having it, and so it's very important to have that information from the caregivers, which on a daily basis accompany the disabled person through the whole process. We also have a slide from one of the workshops with the map that I described previously, and continuing the process of making signs or marking areas with accessibility and not so much accessibility. And so amongst the interviews, both the disabled as well as other players, we started to highlight some sayings that we thought were important to quote them verbatim and to highlight them. And so to accompany this case study report, I'm gonna read them verbatim, or I will. The first one is open quotes. Yes, it is inclusive and accessible, although we still have a long way to go. But what I can say from my experience is that it is getting there. And the second saying or sentence, it's not a question of saying that we have not achieved anything, but that we need to work continuously, because when processes slow down, it is like starting all over again. And sometimes it is very difficult and tiring. On the next slide, what we show here via pictures is the process of journal diaries or photojournals. As I mentioned before, they were done with 5 disabled persons and who we contacted who were willing to record their journal, to live their daily life for a week, and to share these pictures, critical pictures with regarding the places that which for them are pleasant, that they like, that they regularly visit, places that are accessible in the city for them, but also those places that aren't accessible and that they can't visit frequently, and where accessibility, I'm referring not only physical, but also economically. So they sent us pictures of places where they took off the internet. Well, they took the picture off the internet because they weren't able to visit. So because it's cheaper and they did it that way, or because either because accessibility, physical accessibility, or price, they weren't able to go physically there. So we see the pictures here, these 2 pictures that we have here. One of them, we can see 2 people disabled, physically disabled, reduced mobility in motorized wheelchairs, traveling through one of the city's streets. The other picture, also a disabled person who was visiting Parque del Rio, and we find the main sign of the location, which says Medellín, everything blossoms here. Another one of the strategies that or activities were the co-design workshops. And within those co-design workshops, we worked very hard with disabled people. We had 15 guests, disabled guests with different kinds of disabilities. We were very interested in to know them all, physical disabilities, intellectual, sensory disability, also with mental and psychosocial and multiple disabilities. And within that process, we were able to conduct this workshop through activities such as journal mapping. These activities I'll explain subsequently. A journey mapping, participatory mapping, and priority setting. In this slide, what we see is we have a picture of one of the workshops where we can see several disabled persons in one of the groups that was set up, headed by team members. And within this journey mapping, the strategy was that in subgroups, in teams, we tried to make these groups very heterogeneous, the type of disability, people with the disabled persons, for them to tell us those journeys that they make every day, where they can find streets, buildings, places, which for them are hard to access, or that facilitate the access to services in Medellin. And so within that journey mapping exercise, a saying or something, a phrase, a sentence came up that was interesting. And you're going to find these in the report, in the full report of the research project. It says, open quotes, all the time, for example, when I'm on Ruta N and I need to go to the university station, I have to go up to the university station because at university, the elevator is not working. End quote. Oh, I forgot the picture. The picture also we find is one of the groups that were disabled persons, showing what we did, a sign, showing their sign and showing the group those journeys, accessible and not so accessible, that they perform on a daily basis. The other activity was participatory mapping. In this participatory mapping, as I described through the pictures, we used a map, a very big map of the city of Medellin, where we found, you can see all the communities or all the counties and all the districts of the city. The idea here was for the groups to be able to place stickers on post-its on those places that were accessible for both disabled persons, caregivers, as well as other players, and also those other ones that still where the city needs improvement, areas for improvement to be accessible. And we have different factors there, even in some of those places where if they're accessible neighborhoods, for example, if we're gonna see it now, like Laureles, there are also some situations such as commerce that makes it difficult to be able to move on the sidewalks. And so this participatory mapping, we do want to mention one of the sayings or sentence or phrases or mottos that came out. The biggest challenge, open quote, is to address the informal city, to complement the formal city. It is a long-term process. We have to think about how to generate connectivity between the interventions we make. And once again, we have on the slide a picture. This picture reflects the entire process that was done in that participatory mapping. We see the map of Medellin with stickers, post-its in different colors, one color for accessible places and another color for not so accessible places. And lastly, we had the activity of priority setting. We saw those places where they still have to improve so that disabled persons, even their caregivers, can access the services that the city offers on a health level, education, employment. And here it's like, okay, what do we find here? There were barriers, obstacles. How can we improve? What commitment can we get? And through that process, what came out, one of the important sayings or mottos came out, or phrases that refers to the goal of this, the universal design goal of this project, which is, open quote, design for all, not just for persons with disabilities, but that we develop a system that can be used by the whole community. And so we see a picture here on the slide, the entire large slide here with people that participated in the workshop of other players, other actors. We have a disabled person in a wheelchair here raising their hand to ask for the floor and to be able to participate from their perspective and from their awareness or knowledge. And this led us to a multilateral workshop where these players, the stakeholders involved, interviews, photo journals, to the entire thing having to do with urban development. And we had the participation of public and private sectors and disabled persons and their caregivers who nourished the process quite a bit. They supplemented information that we picked up through the interviews, because also in the workshops, we had people appear that they had not participated in the other activities, such as the photo journals and the interviews. So we were able to supplement the information that we had already gathered before. And on the slide, what we find is a picture, once again, of one of the workshops. Here, a full group on the map, marking the community, the districts, or where to put the post-its according to district or county, etc. And lastly, within the priorities that we identified through the research, 6 important ones: topography and peripheral communities. Right now, with Clara, the topography of Medellin is in between mountains that has pros and cons in regards to accessibility. The issue of access to healthcare. One of the biggest aspects is the access to assistive technologies. That's one of the biggest issues. Access to housing. We have made progress with the laboratories. We've moved forward with processes. We also have certain regulations, and now we've also been able to look at how to improve the housing, to make them more accessible, in particular, socially interested or social interest housing. Policy implementation, public policies, as we see in the timeline, we saw that there's a series of regulations that have been put through and locally in the country. Many of them, fortunately, are being met or are not. At the conclusion of the report, for us to articulate this, attitudes, communication, and wayfinding barriers, these highly relevant in the process when we talk about accessibility. Lastly, recreation and culture. Thank you very much. After this first context of the methodology and a little bit about the findings, we're going to detail this list of 6 priorities that we're able to group that were common amongst the perspectives, as we said, disabled persons, public sector, and private sector representatives. Everybody agreed. These are like common priorities that everybody agreed on. So first of all, regarding the topography and peripheral communities, we know that Medellín is a city that is the mountainside of this valley has been built on and sprawl with urban sprawl informally, but it's ours, it's us. We can't erase the periphery, the periphery. We have to work with it. In this slide, we see a photo of one of the neighborhoods of Medellín where the metro cable, the tramway, the cable car goes through. And so to get into the subject, next, as Maria said, we have some famous sayings that some of our participants thought that they were apropos. Regarding the topography of the city, one participant noted that about 78% of persons with disabilities in Medellín live in strata 1, 2, and 3, which, as we know, most of them are concentrated in the periphery. And added to that, the fact that the areas of greatest socioeconomic vulnerability are located on the hillsides, we find that the largest number of people with disabilities are located in communes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 13. We cannot flatten the mountain, so Medellín will never be fully accessible. And that's where I tie into what I was saying at the beginning. We can't erase the periphery. We have to accept our city, and we have to find the most inclusive way and the most relevant way of connecting and continuing to connect the periphery with the center of the valley, not only transportation-wise, services, also opportunities to get to the hillside too, not bring people downtown, but for the services, for everything to get to make it to the hillside, to the periphery, where they live and they work and they also have leisure. And here what we highlight is a couple of aspects to improve, things to improve and one to highlight regarding, once again, topography, a complex topography of our city. The first that represents a challenge, that the topography presents challenges for people in Medellín, especially for people with disabilities that live in lower income communities because it's steep. Another thing is the lack of resources, both technical skills, innovative design thinking, budget, obviously, of course, which is limited, and that prevents infrastructure in hilly areas from improving. Lastly, we highlight something that's positive, but with nuances, and that's, as we know, we have escalators that are electrical staircases or escalate, which helps a lot of people. It improves urbanism, landscaping. It helps people move around, go up and down. But for people with reduced mobility, that's not an accessible solution. They can't use electrical staircases or ladders, or even though we have good interventions, there will be nuances in what we do in these cities. On this slide, we have a picture of the escalators or electrical stairs in the commune from the very part below, from the very bottom. It starts, it goes all the way up. Next, access to healthcare. We have a picture of the committee, its facilities, Elcomite. And one of our participants highlighted where we are weakest is in hospital services. You can see the difficulties from being in a waiting room or being unable to communicate what I need. Next. And here, once again, what we got are 3 challenges posed by access to healthcare and assistive technology. Of course, the first one, inaccessible physical environments and attitudinal behaviors by the staff can be a barrier to healthcare. in Medellín. And here we highlight something important, and that was the need for the healthcare staff to be trained to care for disabled, to offer a gurney, a stretcher, a bed, to have knowledge that the patient can to tell them or decide what they need, what they require, for it not to have to be through a middleman or an interpreter or somebody else convey the message. And to improve the coverage of healthcare services and the disabled, it's fundamental for communication between healthcare staff and the patient be inclusive. Here, once again, I mentioned to note something important, is to bear in mind the disabled cognitive and psychosocial disabilities that need differential support, a different way of presenting information, a different way of dealing with them in accessible manner. And lastly, we need to improve the coverage of healthcare services and a straightforward supply of assistive technologies to get rid of the barriers that exist for disabled people. And here I would dare to say that we all know at least one story of somebody who needs a tutor, needs a custody, or needs to call a lawyer, needs to go more than 3 institutions to be able to get a medication or support technology, wheelchair, crutches, a specialized professional that can care for them or that can wait on them. And this is important, not only Medellín, we generalize this throughout Colombia, through our healthcare system, with the barriers that ultimately people need to resort to medical and legal resources to be able to get what they need. Here we have a picture of one of the support technologies of one of our participants, which is a motorized wheelchair. The third challenge is access to housing. Here we have a picture of a home in the neighborhood of Medellín. We also have 2 challenges to mention and 2 aspects to highlight. The first challenge is that inaccessible living environments can be a barrier for everyday life for disabled people. We heard here many people who were in the workshops, in the interviews, who told us they can't leave the house. They can't leave alone because they have stairs. And so their houses are inaccessible, or they can't go out because the bus doesn't go by, or to get to the bus, it goes through certain inaccessible routes or areas or streets. And so we also want to highlight as a positive aspect, social housing and priority housing initiatives, as well as subsidies to retrofit, are improving living conditions for people with disabilities in some cases. And here, connected with the initiative that we have been working on, we hope that it's going to be delivered towards the end of the year. The home laboratory ISVMed, where we have reconsidered the way of how we design areas, spaces inside homes. We know that public spaces, we have a lot of regulations that regardless of who the player is that executes, public or private, they need to do that. Ramps regarding different devices, but within private homes, we have shortcomings in that regard, and it depends on the will of the builder, And so this is a very interesting challenge, which we're trying to deal with through the laboratory and the new guides that are being produced, what the width of the doors, what they're supposed to be, where to place, what height, the handles, the doorknobs, the sinks. And there are new guides that we hope we'll see very soon, and we hope to see them implemented in projects that are going to be built very soon. Next challenge.
Another challenge that we have is that there's a lack of elevators because of the cost that is related to that in social and priority housing, and that is related to the standards. If you don't have over 5 stories, there's no legal mandate for you to get an elevator. But if you talk about the real daily activities of any human being with a disability, or even us, if you want to take, 5 bags of groceries up 5 stories, is not fun. Imagine now somebody in a wheelchair. So again, this is related to inclusive design. Inclusiveness is good for community at large, not just for those presented with a disability. And another, what we're trying to see now, that at least the first levels and of projects of housing development for social and priority housing will have full access, full inclusive access in the first 2 stories. We understand that that is a challenge because you will not be able to house everyone always on the first story. So this is a call of how we're going to be working with ISBMED, with the Social Institute of Housing and the Habitat of Medellin. Again, but I know that within the law, it is 5 stories and up, you need it. But anyway, here's a picture of one of the participants from the photo workshops. This is the elevator at the first floor. In order to go out of the building, you actually need to go up the stairs. So yes, you do have an elevator, but then you have, you know, a little landing area with stairs. The other component is the implementation of public policies. We had a meeting with community leaders and grassroots leaders, and one of the participants was saying that it is more a matter of political will for development. There is always going to be dependent a lot on the political will and the government. We have seen that just by living in the city. We know that the democracy way of living is change of governments, but every time you change the government or you change the local administration, we see that some projects and some inclusion projects go into a stagnation stage. As based on what Maria Isabel said along that timeline, we do have many standards regarding the rights for disability people, and if compare vis-a-vis with many territories around the world, what they have, nothing. The challenge that we have is that we have it. We have those policies, but we need to implement them. We need to get the full of society to understand it. Sometimes the language that has been used is pure legalese and it's not plain language. And the only ones that understand it are lawyers, but we don't know how we are protected by them because it is just confusion. So we have challenges with implementing those policies and standards. How do we follow up on them? And how do we make sure that we're entitled to what those standards, norms say in order to generate that their use throughout the timeline? Because if you have lots of standards and laws on paper or an internet, that looks beautiful when you do an audit, but if that is not taken to the ground, that is not going to work. That's why we need to replicate projects. We need to replicate actions that have been successful. And again, we need to make sure that even when there's a change of administration, there will be no issues. This is a pan shot of Medellin, and you see it with all the laws that we have. And here, another challenge that we saw here are the attitudes, the behavioral challenges, attitudes and communications and Wayfinder. This is Alpujarra station, if I'm not mistaken. And this is where the coach was arriving, the carriage was arriving, and the participant said it is just as difficult because if they stop due to an accident, they speak through the speakers, and we just look at the watch and say, what's going on? This was a comment with someone that had an audition disability, and they say, we do not understand what is going on because nobody is telling us, and there's no other signal to them, so we don't know what is going on. They say we either look at the clock up there, or we look at our watch, and we say, like, what's going on? We're delayed, but we don't know why. If we talk about this behavioral or attitudinal communication and Wayfinder barriers, we have different challenges. People's attitudes are also a main hurdle, a main barrier. Those presented with disability, they have seen many citizens that because they are not aware about inclusiveness, they pretty much just step on the rest of the people. They do not help you, or they do not provide you with clear communication. If we talk about transport and emergencies, it is essential to have an array of channels in order for everyone to access the information. That is what I mentioned with this quote that, they say through the speakers, but they don't know what's going on. And it is also important that a full range of disabilities consider when you design signage and wayfinding and communication services, not only to design it and say, yes, we need to have Braille, but here, this is Adriana. It has to be efficient people that know that there is a sign. Because if we just put a door there with a Braille, that it's made for blind users, they need to know that every single door then is going to have a Braille sign at a given height, so it is efficient, etc. It is not just installing setting up plaques everywhere if they're not useful. Last but not least, the Accessibility Committee has created guidelines and manuals on how to implement wayfinding for those presented with sensory disabilities, and we will love to see what comes up here. And we have somebody here, a blind woman, coming into and she almost collided with somebody that was just standing there. He actually has a mobile phone on her hand, on his hand, and And the last challenge is related to recreation and culture. You can see here a group of people that are playing bingo. And one participant said that a very important barrier is cultural. People treat you as if you have a cognitive disability because you are in a wheelchair, or people think that you don't have a life. Pretty much this is like, if I'm presented with a disability, they might think that I am not connected with the world. This is linked to those voids that we have when we need to provide information about, and that is reflected by sentences like the ones I mentioned. In this challenge, we have 4 spheres of action. One is the cultural and recreational spaces are frequently inaccessible due to attitudinal and physical barriers, but are key part, really relevant, of inclusive urban life. Social settings like nightclubs, restaurants, bars, other recreation sites usually have physical barriers. So people that participated in our study, I can say, I can get there to the place, but I cannot actually enter the facility. Some also told us that the night bus transport options are very limited. So you go to the disco, you can get in, you can get there, you can enter, you can enjoy it, but then when you want to return, the nighttime bus is not going to facilitate somebody, for example, in a wheelchair. So you need to take a cab, or you need to see how you do it. And, or for example, many taxis not stopping because they see you're in a wheelchair, or bus drivers from the transport authority saying, oh, I don't stop the bus because I don't know how to work the ramp, so I just don't stop if you have a wheelchair. And that is real life. And then the inclusive exercise and gyms are very important to represent a key opportunity to enhance social inclusion and well-being. This is another pan shot of Medellin. This is at nighttime. The previous slide had a panoramic shot of Medellin. And now I'm going to give the floor to Micaela for the final wrap-up comments. Micaela, you have the floor, ma'am. So time flies, and I'm going to speak fast because the team has done a very comprehensive description of the project. That before I finish, I wanted to give you a general view and entering the real life of people and the planet. We know that an inclusive an accessible city is key if you want to meet SDG targets. And we also know that inclusion and resilience go hand in hand. In Medellin, we have seen that sustainability and inclusive infrastructure can often be combined, and that obviously it's a great example for other cities. Some things that are happening here, we want to replicate in other places. For example, how we're dealing with climate change in an inclusive manner. So in the report, you will see lots of recommendations for action, recommendations from different stakeholders. Here, I'm just highlighting some of them. We know that participation and inclusive design for all is paramount, and you can do that through an inclusive city strategy that actually encompasses a wide range of disability and brings together the whole city. Along with that, we need to develop inclusive design and accessibility standards that take into account local contexts, such as the peripheries or the metroplex areas. Implementation of strategies and accountability also will be the backbone of the standards and the norms that we have. And we also need to, of course, have a budgetary support for inclusive projects. We also need better access to AT and infrastructure that supports this assistive technology use, and we need training and awareness to create a more inclusive culture and attitudes that are really inclusive. Here in the picture, we see a tactile map that was used in one of our activities here with the mapping workshop.
So what would an inclusive Medellin look like? Well, first of all, we need mobility, inclusive mobility. We need public transportation that's accessible from their home, from their place of residence. We want a pleasant urban life with a leisure, culture, safety, public spaces and sports, all inclusive. And we also want homes and services that are accessible to all and affordable, and also the establishment of inclusive orientation and wayfinding strategies, orientational, and also thriving and connected communities with central and peripheral areas that are inclusively connected. And lastly, access to opportunities. The elimination of social and physical barriers, also connecting with the provision of assistive technologies without long wait times. These are some ideas that we came up with of an inclusive Medellin. If after the event you'd like to share more of your ideas to put it all together, that would be highly welcome. And now we're there. And if you'd like, we're done. If you'd like to access more information, you can get in touch with me, with the team. You have here in the room the copies of the report and to read it and learn more. But we are here for questions and remarks and comments. Given the time, I will mention now that from this time forward, we can say that the report has been launched. It's live. Now we want to move on to comments on the part of some stakeholders that have participated in the project. So thank you very much. And Maria Clara, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you very much. Well, we wanted to have 3 interventions, also a few reflections, thoughts on the process, what we heard here. Once again, these 3 groups that I mentioned, which were the ones that we worked with, public and private sector and community sector. So next one, I'm going to first invite on behalf of Janet Alvarez, Technical Director of the Secretariat of Social Inclusion of the City Hall of Medellin, Ms. Castellanos, on her behalf, to express a few thoughts and comments regarding what we just experienced and listened to. And then we will give the floor to Bernie Blumen. He is the director of Columbia Accessible. And also he provided us with very interesting notes throughout the entire research process. And he has quite a bit of experience in consulting and practice regarding inclusion and accessibility. And lastly, John Durango, who's the president of the MADI Foundation. He represents today the people with disabilities on behalf of the foundation, of which he is president, Muscular Dystrophy. Welcome all. All right. What a shame that our current technical director, Janet Alvarez, was unable to be with us here today. We are very, very happy for her to be a disabled woman who is orienting the disabled team, the disability team. I think that's going to be a really good kickoff startup to have that person as our director and listening, paying close attention to the results of the work. I think that it's highly significant for Medellin that in all planning processes that it currently has, Medellin has pretty interesting experience in planning. I think over the course of the 21st century, I would say. And it has considered the issue of disability and inclusion and accessibility in a very interesting manner, which has been woven into and consolidating itself over time in comprehensive, integral urban areas that starts at the beginning of the century. I think that was the important lessons it gave us, how to do urban planning, social urban planning. The accessibility plan that is being proposed by Metro to improve the accessibility conditions. For these next 3 years, an investment on the part of Metro, 60 billion pesos, more or less, to intervene 11 stations to work on the Metro station, make them accessible. We know that there are many gaps and the dynamics of a metro that was never planned out for this. These types of plans and proposals are quite inspiring. The 2030 plan for Medellin is also as a reliance, as a commitment to everything that to accessibility and inclusion. I think it's very important. The mobility plan, the manual for public spaces, for public areas. We have tools that we can use, that we can rely on. And lastly, we were saying socialization and within the accessibility plan, that this would have been impossible if these incorporation of accessibility issues in different processes would have been impossible if there hadn't been citizen mobility, a grassroots movement, and so action. And so that's what really makes a difference, an important, significant difference versus Medellin versus the world. Plus, we have business persons currently who are working specifically on the issue of accessibility. And that also inspired us a lot. Uba, Bambad, Willie, Columbia Accessible, to have a whole series of possibilities. I think that also really inspired us. And I think that the Orient, it sets the compass for us towards where we need to go. And all the proposals that were just offered, where we need to orient. I think it's very interesting, the match that exists between the backbone of access and accessibility that was designed by civil society and the institutions versus the policy for inclusion for disabled persons, agreement 144 2019. In the backbone of that accessibility, the line, they submit 3 strategies. Mobility, human and transportation mobility is one, ratified in this research, and it's very interesting. The strategy for housing, for dignified and accessible housing, everything that has to do with IT, and communication, ICT, regarding accessibility and communication with justice, we think that really supplements a lot, and it ratifies it. It vindicates everything we're trying to do. And to specify the challenge that we have of tackling the hillsides is we're way behind on that. We're thinking about accessible in Medellín. We have to think it from the periphery, we work on the valley, we work the tourist side, and where do we go? How are we going to tackle an issue that is pretty complex? The periphery, the hillsides, given the terrain itself. And another thing that draws my attention is how to separate the issue of accessibility as an exclusive issue that pertains to disabled people. If we manage the 2.5 million citizens of Medellin residents join in this necessary cause, which is accessibility and environment for everybody, we're talking about 2.5 million people that are joined together into this vindication of accessibility, and not just 80,000 disabled people. Because to consolidate an accessible environment is to consolidate it for everybody, and all cycles and all life cycles that we may have. And so I think that disconnection of accessibility only for the disabled, I think getting rid of that. And I think in the emergencies and accessibility, disability, we also have to orient that. And I'd like to thank you. For everything you've done for Medellin. And this is a vindication. It's a reward for civil society that is organized, that has withstood the test, has held firm, and has directed towards addressed public and private institutions about how we need to make the city for everybody. And I think that participation is fundamental. And I just wanted to express a little comment here that I might be a little resistance. Or the Accessibility Committee wasn't founded in 2021. The Accessibility Committee was created by an agreement in 2012. And then it followed its own course. And what happened in 2021, which I think is very important, is that the committee is ratified in that agreement 144/2019. And it takes on a dynamic that's pretty interesting for the city. And so we can take that into account in the revision of the document. Very important at this time, because it's a committee that currently is offering recommendations for strategic projects for cities, which ultimately has been driving, indeed, important resources, everything having to do with accessible communication through a bulletin on digital content, and accessible communication for the communicators on everything having to do with the public sector. And another thing I'd like to mention is that we're designing with EDU, the Secretariat of the Ministry of Culture and Communications, we from the Secretariat of Inclusion and the Disability Team and the Accessibility Component, we're designing a decree, a law, an act, how we need to create massive events for the cities. How do we make them accessible? Mass events. And we think that that's going to be very important to continue to make progress in that area, everything having to do with accessibility. I thank you very deeply for your contribution, and the team, the disability team, is at your disposal for any questions or comments or feedback, etc. Thank you very much, Wilson, and the team, of course. I'm going to make an announcement, and that is our transmission live finishes at 10:30. So before giving the floor to Bernie, we would like to bid the group that is with us online farewell. Thank you. Thank you for having connected. And of course, for more information and to get to know these last minutes of this session, which is about to come to a close, we will publish all the information on our website. And of course, now for the on-site audience, the QR code, well, you'll be able to scan and look and consult the entire report. Bernie, welcome now. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Maria Clara, Micaela. Thank you very much for the invitation. I had an accident 20 years ago. And when I had the accident, it was, I mean, truly, there was nothing. Accessibility was virtually non-existent. And you had to plead, to beg. I remember getting to places to look for handicap parking and not even ask if there was any. And I wouldn't bother because I knew that and ask the parking attendant, please, the last place where nobody would park next to me. And from there to be here today and to know that this study was conducted, that they counted on us, they relied on us, there's so many people working on the accessibility after so many years. It's not only pride, but it's also peace of mind that we're making progress. Unfortunately, in the day-to-day where I work in accessibility for the last 15 years, and I've had to see how it's 3 steps forward and 7 steps back. And it's tough. It's really hard, the issue of accessibility, to know that you're working with so much vehemence, so strongly, and then you make it, and then and then you're all back, not even back to the drawing board, but sometimes even behind the drawing board, from behind the drawing board. And so things have happened. The result of the study, the fact that we're here is one of the things. We've had things that happen where accessibility to this place, for example, that I had the honor of participating in its design, and to know that now people can come in and out and not ask if there's handicap access. But there's a huge amount of work left to be done. And to say that we're doing okay is not appropriate. It's not adequate. No. Maybe if we compare Medellín with other cities in Colombia, because in Colombia, accessibility is totally behind. But Medellín is not okay. It's not accessibility. Going out in Medellín is almost impossible to use what the city offers. We still have to call to ask if the place has accessibility before you leave the home. And that's not accessibility. We're not okay. We're not... And I think that one of the main causes is that we don't understand the value of disabled people for society. I work with accessibility, and to say this is counterproductive for my work. But accessibility is not the important part, because making a place accessible is downloading one of the million manuals of accessibility that's on the internet and interpreting it. What we need to do is to understand the value of people with disability for society. When we realize that and how important we are, that we drive the cities, that we can get out of the house and study and work and pay your taxes and consume the cities, that time the city will say, I have to get into accessibility. The challenge is huge. The challenge is enormous. And the idea is to maybe 5 steps forward and maybe only 1 step back, but not 5 steps forward and 10 back. We have a lot of
that we're
work
doing,
left, public,
and of
private
course,
sector, and of course, people with disabilities,
and we need to make sure
to
that
vindicate our
we
possibilities and our
make this
abilities, and to make the
community grow.
community grow.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much, Bernie. And Bernie's organization is a consulting organization, so that they have. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you for your message, and thank you for the experience, for your leadership, for being a driving engine here in the city. And last and not least, we have John Durango. John was a participant, a very active participant in all the processes, in the photojournal, in the interviews, in the workshops. And on top of that, he is an active citizen, promotive inclusiveness from Madi Foundation. And I think he will be sharing that. John, thank you very much for being here, for your feedback, and we're ready to listen to you. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and very good morning for all of you. We have been witnesses of how people have been just locked in there. And making sure to make this an inclusive society more egalitarian and equalitarian. And so they don't call us people on wheels, or they don't call us those handicapped people. Somebody that has dreams and wants to be independent. It is important to understand that from Elcomite and from this UCL funded program, we will be able to, at the end, have a city that is universally accessible, that will have spaces for all. A disability sometimes is caused by the environment, by the habitat, even for those environments that have been not thought for all. We're talking here about young adults, children, boys, girls, those presented with disability, orphan diseases that might not be visible, but are there. And when I talk about those diseases, I talk about Becker muscular dystrophy. So thank you to Elcomite for inviting me to be here. I love Elcomite. Since the age of 17, I came from Neborina, a neighboring place here. And it will take me 8 days to come here to get my treatment. You've made me in Elcomite, you've made me what I am today. Thank you for allowing me to be an entrepreneur, for having education, and having Elcomite here is something that really fills me with joy. When we see a city that is going to be accessible. Medellin was chosen among 6 countries in the world, and that is important because the world sees how our country progresses and our city progresses. I'm saying this from my heart. I've been lucky enough to travel. I've been to over 10 countries. But I'm in love with this city when I see the infrastructure, the communication campaigns, when I see what has been done here in Medellin, making me a free citizen where I can go about, where I don't have any limits, where I don't have any barriers, when I don't have spatial barriers. You've made me what I am. You have enabled me to make me a free citizen of the world. And therefore, I believe that it is from our foundation, Almaldi, we want to empower those that are presented with orphan diseases so they can have an education, they could have a family, and we could help them fight for their right. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you to the city of Medellín. Thank you to Elcomite, the city of Medellín that blossoms just like that sign said in the Camino del Rio. Thank you all. Thank you very much for your words and your remarks. Time to switch. Colombian Sign Language interpreters. And we will now would like to officially close the online event, and we will invite everyone to have some coffee or tea or water. We will be able to just do some on-site networking and exchange. But before we officially close, I wanted to thank all the participants that have shared with us today. It has been an honor to have you here. It has been an honor to have you here in the room and those of you who are on the other side of the screen. And I would like to invite the team up on stage. Please, let's have a family picture. The team, please, Elcomite. Marcela, please. You are representing the funding pillar here. And in the next slide, we're going to have a QR code. You can scan QR code and you will be able to download the report. Of course, that is going to be much more detail if compared to the summary that you have with you. So share it, disseminate that with your network, with everyone. And we do have a little snack outside, and this is an open space for us to share our agendas, to network, to get to know each other. Let us go outside, and of course, let us enjoy it. We're here for your comments, your remarks. Thank you very much, and an applause.